morning, Steve. How are you?
I like that phrase you just used as we were starting up, not a podcast. And you gave me permission to use it. So I'm using it right now. Let's do a not a podcast.
I'm down.
So, what do you have in mind when you say not a podcast?
Um, so there's so many podcasts out there, and I think we're all quite conditioned to a certain format. And anytime you get conditioned to a thing, I don't know if this is true for all humans, but at least for me, it just becomes like a rerun, even if it's new content. If it's the same format all the time, it just loses its uniqueness. So I'd just rather have a conversation and let it take its natural course. And if there's any value in there that you and I can splice together, all the better.
Perfect. So, I think our topic today is building a high quality pipeline. And I thought I would just do a quick introduction in case we actually do this kind of like a podcast, even though it's not a podcast. For anybody who's listening, Jamal and I first spoke about his idea for a mega deal program back in 2018. We've known each other since before that. Uh, but that particularly caught my attention because 2018, I'm going to ask him about this. It was really just an idea. At this point in 2024, he's one of the most successful sales influencers and coaches in the world, which means, maybe this will alienate the audience. You could be a successful salesperson at some big company and maybe not be that great at sales. It can kind of happen to you. But for somebody to go out in the world and create something from nothing in 2018 to 2024 and make it something, that's very successful. I won't mention revenue, but very successful, is really impressive. And he did it on his own. One of the things that Jamal and I have in common, one of my missions in life is to point out the negative impact of murmuration. Murmuration is that beautiful, the starlings, when they fly together in a group, it's all like they have one mind, which is beautiful when starlings do it. But when people do it, it's like hive mentality. And there's a lot of that in sales, and it leads to a lot of bad practice in professional selling. Jamal is an innovative thinker who doesn't let murmuration or group thinking or hive thinking get in his way. And so I look at him as kind of a sales mythbuster. And he's also one of the most sincerely nice people I have ever met. So I'm very interested in getting that content he just mentioned and seeing if there's something we can splice together that's useful to the sales professional community. So welcome, Jamal.
Thanks for having me, Steve. I'm excited.
Is there anything you want to say other than to kick off with my questions?
Only to add that you were my first sales mentor, right? The very first training that I can remember in my entire career was what we did back in Northern Virginia, however many years ago it was now.
Yes, let's leave that math a little fuzzy. You're quite a gentleman. See, I told you he was nice. I still have notes from our 2018 conversation when you were just getting started. If you wouldn't mind, because I think this idea of just starting from zero and making it happen on your own is really important. What was your situation then in terms of revenue and clients and the program that you and I talked about that you were creating at the time?
I mean, it was zero. It was just an idea, and I was trying to figure out what was my next step in my career. So, like so many sellers, um, there's a maturity curve in individual contributor sellers, and I was the kind of seller who never wanted to go into sales management, because all the sales leaders who I saw were just even more burnt out than the sellers on their teams, and this is way pre-COVID, so they were always on a plane, being a spreadsheet jockey, 4 days a week they're away and just beat up by levels of management above them, and always working multiple deals and quite scattered. And I was like, that's not for me. So I was an IC for a nice long time, and then at some point I got burned out of that, especially doing the kinds of transactions that I was doing were so complex and so kind of pressure cooker filled that the first one, it took me a month to get over it. I was just in brain fog after it finally got done. The second one was similar, but the third, I was clinically exhausted, and that hung with me for about a year. And I got sick easily, and I was very slow, and I thought, okay, it's enough of this. What am I going to do next? So I started to reach out to people who I trusted, and you were at the top of the list. And I was like, I'm thinking of doing this thing. I just did, and I had done my very first podcast, and it was, I guess you could say, it was well received. And I started to get a whole bunch of sellers coming to me saying, "Hey, I just heard your podcast. That's really cool. Love the idea of the mega deal. How do you do it? Can you teach me?" And so that was really kind of the beginning. I was like, okay, there's demand for the story, at least, if not how to teach it. And the first time I did it, I just said, okay, I'll take 10 of you guys for free, and I'll get on Zoom with you once a week, and I'll teach you everything I know about how to do large deals until I'm spent and until I've taught you everything. And in exchange, I just want your feedback. Is it complete? Is it actionable? Can you do this on your own without a whole bunch of hand holding, et cetera? And so we did that as an iteration with 10 sellers. And one of them landed a mega deal within 12 months, and he later started his own startup. And then he was on Dragon's Den in Canada and had this kind of illustrious hockey stick of a career. Another one went from Teradata to Seismic, and then just closed an 8-figure deal last fiscal. That was I think it's the second largest deal that has ever happened at Seismic. So when sellers started to have success, then I started to charge. And as I charged, more people started to come in, and then more people had success, and then the price kind of kept going up until it became I guess you could say, a viable services offering. And at some point, it covered my family's expenses. And so I was able to say goodbye to working for somebody else. And then it became a business that started to grow. And that's kind of the short story.
Great. So to the extent you're willing to share it, where are you today? I know you're not one who's going to brag, but can you give us a sense of what the growth looks like over that 6 years?
Oh, yeah. Well, it was very slow in the earliest days because I was doing it as a side gig. And in the very beginning, I was doing stuff for free. And so going from free to something, well, that's a huge hockey stick because the growth is infinite going from zero. But I would say over the past 3 years, it's anywhere from 2 to 5x growth over the past 3 years, each of the past 3 years.
I had that exact same experience. You just took me back to it. And there's a lot of people that'll go out and start their own thing, and they'll have an idea and they don't realize it's like a compound growth curve. And if you just put that on a Cartesian coordinate, it's flat on the front end, and it takes 2 or 3 years. And it also took me giving up my corporate gig, because as soon as I did that, all of a sudden my business exploded. But that's my story, not your story. Do you think burning that bridge or giving up the corporate gig was part of what got it going faster?
For sure. I mean, for me, it was clearly just, well, there was the mental side, and then there was what do you want to say, the operational side. Mentally, I just left a whole lot of baggage from that life, or the life of being an individual contributor working for a large or small tech company. And then operationally, I had all this time, right? I didn't have a day job anymore, and I could devote myself 100%. And then the magic of focus kicks in, and it really started to become a thing.
It really is a magic of focus and burning bridges and only having that one path. It's my theory that your clients and mine have a common predisposition. I don't know your clients. I would love to interview a couple of those folks you just mentioned. But it is my theory they are lifelong learners, and they're focused on professional selling. It's a lot of people that get into sales because they couldn't get another job. So there's two different groups of people there with regard to that. What's your take on that idea of people who look at it as a honorable and very lucrative profession, and those who are kind of stuck in the job?
I would say, well, from my perspective, I started very early. My first sales experience was selling books door to door to pay for college. And at that point, you're just kind of reaching and grasping for anything to be able to make an income to achieve a financial outcome. But I don't, I sold for 20 years, and in the first half of that, it was quite money focused. But somewhere in that, where that curve takes place, you do realize, holy cow, the ones that do really well actually make it a craft. It's not just an activity that generates cash. It's a craft. And when you see these, kind of savants at what they do, I still tell the story of Marcy Akers, right? She's my North Star. She was never my mentor. She didn't sit me down and say, step one, step two, step three. But she was a senior seller at Oracle when I was a rookie back in 2007. And where everybody else was doing like single $500,000 to $2 million deals, she was doing 8-figure deals in on-premise software back in 2007. And she did it back to back a few years. And that was a moment where that really clicked, that holy cow, this is an artist at work. And man, I would love to be an artist. I would love to do this really, really well. And then it became the journey to chase mastery. And I just fumbled in the dark for years. And through all the frustrations and the false starts and the companies with not a great product market fit, and getting fired twice in a row, not in a riff either. I got fired because I wasn't selling twice in a row. And then trying to come to grips with, is this career even for me? Do I have the chops for this? Is this gonna go anywhere? And then getting to the other side where I got into a selling reality that matched my capabilities. And then things just really kind of took off. So I don't know, to go back to what you were saying, I definitely think in my experience and what I saw a lot happening to a lot of other sellers in the beginning, there's a pretty black and white aspiration, which is how can I do well financially through this? But the longer you're in it, at least a good chunk, not everybody, but a good chunk of folks look at it and say, okay, if unless there's something else that I'm passionate in doing, if sales is where I'm going to be, I really want to do it well. How do I become that elite seller?
Yeah, I actually wake up excited about the next little split test or the thing I'm going to try. It's like golfing or any other hobby or sport. You can really get good at it and enjoy it for itself. I think that is, like we started this piece, a little rare. That's why my ballerina's back there. Edgar Degas, who painted the original version of that, said it takes great effort to make it look effortless. And I kind of take inspiration from that. Let's talk about the mega deal thing real quick, and then we'll focus on building high quality pipeline. What are some of the basics of the mega deal concept?
So I didn't invent it. Definitely not. It was a term that I first heard when I was a rookie at Oracle. And at that time, it was a deal, they call it above the fold, which was over 10 million bucks. And so there was a certain level of approvals that needed to happen, and how the deal was done and how you were compensated, et cetera. So it was a term that I kind of got used to there. But then it just became this ubiquitous term, which meant really large deal, right? Whatever company you're working for. And I didn't learn how to do it until several years into my career, a few years into my time at Oracle, and I was mentored in how to do it. I came into an account that was an important account, but they were on the verge of churning. Things were not going well, and my first line manager had just left the company. So my head of sales, the VP of sales of Europe, because I was living in Sweden at the time, and my head of professional services became active sellers in this one deal because it was a do or die situation. And long story short, I was kind of carrying their bags, right? I was the almost a rookie in a way. But during that experience, which was a 9-month period of evaluating whether they were going to renew or not, the team took this account from a run rate contract of about 10 million bucks to $53 million. And that experience changed my vision and understanding of what selling can be. And it changed my life. And then I started to think, well, is that a one-hit wonder? And fortunately, the lesson stuck to the point where I was able to do a couple more of those over about 8 years. And so once I learned how to do it, I was like, wow, this is my thing. I love it and I hate it, but I love it. So I'm going to keep trying to do it. And it became my professional aspiration.
Beautiful. Starts with, if I may observe, just humility and the teacher will appear when the student is ready. I'll give you a choose your own adventure question here. We could talk more about some of the basics that you got out of that experience, because I bet you anybody listening to this is like, what's the next level of detail? Or we could switch to defining high quality pipeline and creating high quality pipeline, which I'm sure is actually part of that. Your call.
I mean, so to the first question, in a deep level of detail, there's tons of stuff we could talk about. We'd never get it done in a week. But at a high level, the big unlock, not just for me, but for the vast majority of sellers who I teach, is the whole concept of raising the level of the conversation to the executive level as soon as possible. And that has a lot of it carries a lot of assumptions about what's going to happen. One, you're going to connect with senior executives within the account at the beginning of the sales cycle, or as close to it as you can. So many reps either don't do it or they wait till the end because they think, I got to have this thing totally buttoned up before I bring in my whoever, CRO, CEO, what have you. And it's opposite of what you should do. You should bring in your big guns as soon as possible to qualify in or qualify out for a big deal. Because you want to go to the parents, not the kids, right? You want to go to the parents and you want to say, are you actually going to spend on Christmas this year? I'll get the Christmas list from the kids, but I got to know what your budget is and what kind of stuff you want to buy this year. And once they give you the blessing and they say, yeah, your stuff is worth my kid's time, then you go and you spend time in the organization with all the worker bees and the mid-level managers to assess whether your value proposition is going to shake out for that deal. So that's like the biggest unlock right there. How do you engage? How do you connect with and engage senior leadership early? And how do you not tell a product story? How do you tell a business story that they can get behind, because they're already looking for something like that this year? So that is probably the biggest lesson that I learned about doing large deals, was the front loading of the executive process.
Brilliant. So let's go to the next level down on that. First of all, you got to get the meeting, and then you got to conduct the meeting. Let's start with getting the meeting. Any secrets you're willing to share here in our Not a Podcast about getting those senior executives to meet with you?
I mean, the secret that's right out in front of us is leveraging your own executives or other senior people who are aligned with your success. And that's immediately going to be either your board of directors or your board of advisors or your investors. Because at that level, at the executive level and at the investor level and at the board level, all those folks are connected and they want to be connected. That's their thing, is being connected to other people like them. And we're not like that. We're down below the clouds until we push ourselves up. So when we go there, it's like tapping into, I'm all about leverage, right? I don't want to grow something from seed. I want to leverage energy, relationships, problems, emotion, finances that are already in place. So in this case, the secret one secret is access existing relationships. Don't try to build one from the ground up. So it becomes, who do I know who knows the person who I'm trying to get to? And it's not easy and it's not a straight line, but it kind of falls within the whole thing that I think is really cool, which is it's better to slow down to speed up. So where so many reps are like, I'm going to go do 100 outreach calls, and somewhere in there, I'm going to find the pony in the haystack. And that idea has fallen so flat for mega deals. You can get lots of meetings and you can get lots of activity, and there will be some deals in there. But when it comes time to do mega deals, that's like putting an infantry trying to break down a castle wall. Doesn't work. You need it. You need artillery, right? You don't need infantry. So you need a different method, and that's really working warm introductions, working existing connections, etc.
Good analogy. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about specifically was how to conduct that executive meeting. So let me just throw that question to you. When you finally get that executive meeting, how does that go? How do you do it?
Well, they're typically short because you don't get a lot of time with senior executives. So my initial assumption is I'm going to get 30 minutes. It's a luxury to get 60. And the magic is in the research and the prep. So research you can do on your own. You can go pull down SEC filings and you can talk to people. Well, there's research and there's discovery. Then you start talking to people in the ecosystem, or who are maybe some folks who might be the right-hand man or late woman, or close to these executives who you're going to meet with. And like a good trial attorney, you never want to ask a question you don't already know the answer to. So the more prep you do, the more you're going to know about what this executive or these executives care about, what they're trying to get done this year. And the executive meeting is really the classic way of doing it is you bring your own executive. Now you got two folks who are kind of they have peer business status. And then the seller becomes more of the choreographer, not the quarterback, the coach on the side who's deploying the players, right? And it just becomes a simple conversation between two executives. So you got to prep your own exec, you got to have the right story. And it's basically like, look, here's an idea. We see what you're trying to do. We know the name of the project. We see what the KPI is you're trying to hit. Tell me more about it. What's your view, et cetera. You get, have that dialogue. It's not a didactic, it's a conversation. And then it's like, well, we've done something, we've created outcomes like that. Customer story number 1, number 2, number 3. But don't take our word for it. Let's go kick the tires, right? If you give us the right folks from your side, we'll bring our best folks too, and we'll go do an analysis and try it out. And that'll give you quantifiable data that'll help you make a decision if it's worth it to work together or not. I don't know if it's worth it now or not. I'm not going to pitch you on doing a deal. I want to pitch you on doing an analysis. Are you up for that? Is this worth your people's time this year? And either they bite or they don't. And if they don't, you just saved yourself 9 to 18 months. Because you were going to get that answer at the end of a sales cycle if you're trying to climb up the mountain instead of trying to get helicoptered down. And if they say yes, you just got access to everybody in the organization who you need, because this mandate to take a look at your stuff has just come from somebody quite senior.
Beautiful. Lean selling, get the defects out early. It's good for both parties. So let's talk about building high quality pipeline. I know you're currently really focused on that. Is there anything you'd like to drill down on there?
I mean, it's become a fascination, right? Because right now, the ambition is not how can I do a mega deal, or it's always there, but it has now been placed in second class to, geez, I need pipeline right now. Almost everybody's pipeline is anemic. And so if we're ever going to do a mega deal, we got to go tee it up. And you probably saw a couple of months ago, Salesforce, they changed their policy. They used to run 2x pipeline, but they went to the street. They went on their earnings call last quarter, and they had missed some of their revenue and some of their KPIs. And they didn't want that to happen again. So they moved from 2x to 3x pipeline coverage for their own sellers. So if the premier selling organization in the world is bringing a 50% increase to pipeline coverage, it's probably a signal to the rest of us that it could be a good idea if we do it the right way. And as we peel back the onion on what is high quality pipeline anyway? And so for me, I just try to keep a simplistic definition of high quality pipeline is when you get past the second meeting and the customer still wants to talk to you. Right? You did an initial kind of pitch. Maybe it turned into a next call or two, which is either discovery, demo, or both. That's the traditional way. And if the customer goes through the introduction to the value proposition of what your product or service can do, and they still want to talk, that's a defendable deal, right? It's even more defendable if you do have access to the senior folks who say, yeah, we want to look at this. So what does it take to get great quality pipeline? In our experience, I have a community, right? It's a paid community of people who are vetted, who are trying to help each other get better all the time. And in this community, we're constantly iterating on what's working right now, what's working right now. And it turns out that there are 4 pivotal skills that we need. And some of them, most sellers really give short shrift or don't do it all. And the first one is deep account research. Because every good thing starts with insights. And where are you going to get the insights? You got to do it through the research. So number 1 is research. Number 2 is how do you take the research and turn it into a value story? Let's just call it a point of view, right? You got to have an opinion. You got to say, what I know about you and what I know about what our stuff does, there's a path to make you better. And this is what I want you to consider. This is something that's worth your time. And the third is prospecting, because you got to get this idea in front of them. So you got to know how to tell the story. If you're not getting a warm introduction, you got to tell it cold. How do you do that? And the last one is then discovery. When you do strategic discovery, this is the way that you go back and forth with what you learned in research to validate, okay, is what I've researched actually happening on the ground? Do the folks who are affected, do they have a special opinion based on kind of in the engine room experience? And these are the 4 skills that you need to get pipeline up and running. You'll need more skills to run the deal, grow the deal, close the deal. But those 4 skills are the ones that you need to actually get quality pipeline. So you're at cruising altitude and you're not worried about crashing.
Super. One follow-up question there. I listen to a lot of call recordings. That's a key part of my practice. And I think when you suggest to people they have to do things like get all the elements of MedPick, for instance, or challenge somebody or have a point of view, all those things you say can, when you listen to them on tape, be implemented well or be implemented really poorly. And a lot of folks are going to interpret having a point of view. When I hear that on tape, it's comes across as I know more about you and your business than you do, and that's certainly going to backfire. So just to put a little finer touch on point of view, how do you make that work in the actual conversation?
It's just such a great question. There was that same misunderstanding about the whole concept of the challenger sale with commercial teaching. There was a big, okay, I need to challenge, which means I need to be abrasive and arrogant, and I need to actually show them that I know more than they do about their own business. And that sounds like what you're talking about.
Yes.
And of course,
And I've heard that on tape.
Yeah. So it could be a personality thing, but what I see that really works is when you've learned a good deal, and then you just ask kind of, you can be genuinely curious when you ask questions. And the question starts with a statement and then turns into a question, which is, okay, so here's what I've read, or here's what I heard in conversations, either with your people or your partners or whatever, here's a scenario. What do you think of it? Or where does it lead? Or have you tried this, or that? And through guided questions, you're actually leading them down kind of a logical path rather than let me tell you what happens here and then here and then here, and this is what you got to do. And if you don't, you're just dumb, and etc. And that's a more forceful way to do it. But when you put forth some facts and then put some questions around those facts that are the questions are leading to the next step, then you're really asking for their input. And when it's done well, it's very persuasive, right? It's very, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that, or yes, we have thought about that, but at least this guy Jamal has done his homework, and I like how he thinks. So he's not overbearing. It becomes riffing on the topic. And I'll give you a great example. One tool to get there is the whiteboard. So often I'll just, again, I know we're post COVID and everything's on Zoom, but there's a whiteboard on Zoom too. But I'll just start to whiteboard an idea, and I'll say, look, here's what I think is going on, and I draw it all out. Your process has 4 steps, and here's the bottleneck, and it's because of this, and that. Is that even right? And then I just hand the pen to them. And then they come up, and the best thing that could happen is they correct me. And the reason why it's the best thing is because that's a process of them starting to take ownership of this shared idea. And so 1, it gets more accurate. 2, it becomes theirs because they're adding to it and they're shifting it. And that's what you want. You want the subject to take an idea. It's like a relay race, right? You hand off the baton and they take off running, because guess what? They're going to be in the room when the decision's made and you're not. So that's an alternative way of doing commercial teaching that is less abrasive and more collaborative.
Beautiful. I'm so glad I asked. If somebody wanted to, they're listening to this and they wanted to go out and put something into practice right away, you just gave a great example. Is there anything else that comes, something else you would maybe prefer? This is a great way to start to build high quality pipeline.
I mean, the first thing is put yourself in your customer's shoes, and the only way to do that is to find out what's going on, because it's a big turnoff when a sales process begins with an assumption of value rather than assuming to understand, right? So I guess the biggest thing that I'm learning right now is the value of conversations. And a conversation happens before what you might think of as a sales process. So just being in a conversation with whatever level of stakeholder is an effort to understand and even validate what they're going through. The conversation itself should be valuable to them. And as I'm talking, I think I'm trying to keep it like actionable, but it's actually a level of mindset. So I guess what I would say is, instead of coming up with a product-based pitch, hey, do you have this problem? I got a widget. Let's talk about the widget. Rather, come up with, hey, I see what's going on in your world. I would love to hear how you're impacted by it, because I got other folks. I'm having meetings with your boss's boss. But if you're impacted by this, I want to know about it, because I want your voice in this conversation. That's very different. And that's a great place to start.
Beautiful. I follow you. I follow Ian Koniak, and I saw that interview you did with him. And you really kind of touched on this significantly. But as you talked to him, you discussed the importance of being humble and not trying to be the smartest person in the room. And of course, you talked about this idea of having a point of view. And I think it's hard for folks to keep both of those concepts in their mind at the same time. You kind of go one way or you go the other way. How do you balance those things? You've already given us some great insight, but any more you would like to say on that?
Um, the person who thinks, whether they are or not, the person who thinks they are the smartest person in the room, everybody else in the room can just smell that. And human interactions, the way that we're built is we're trying to bring balance in between human interactions. So let's say it's a conversation. Humans are always trying to bring, you taught me that actually, the how to bring balance in a conversation. So if you become too salesy or um too prescriptive in your views, the audience is going to try to move against that to bring back the balance. But if you come across in a way that empowers and engages the audience, that's when they lean in, because it's an invitation for them to participate and bring what they have in terms of their views and values. So I guess what I'd say is, in having conversation, have conversations instead of pitches. And a conversation is, it's best when you're doing mostly listening and asking questions. And you might add something which might guide the conversation, but you're not dominating it or leading it.
Yeah, you'd mentioned a mindset. Um, there's techniques, there's sales process, there's moves, we used to call them, but all that kind of gets in the way. And what's most important, in my point of view, is the mindset. Anything more you'd like to, because if you have the right mindset, you ask the questions the right way. You make statements when it's appropriate. You ask questions when it's appropriate. When you have the right mindset, you just have this aura that the other person senses, and you either respect them or you don't, and they can tell that. Anything about how you achieve that mindset?
I tell you, the mindset that I've learned to have is, it's the inversion of the leadership triangle, right? So, classically we think of organizations as hierarchical, and the worker bees are at the bottom. That's the most participants, and then there's this mid-level, and then there's the top, and they have all the power, and there's only a few of them, or maybe one. And when you invert that, so that the most important, or the person with the most resources and decision-making ability, perceives themselves to be having to support everybody within the organization, magic happens. And we can do the same thing in sales too. So if we really have the mindset that we're here to serve them, then we can say, I'm excited that I have a great idea for you guys, but you guys got to think it's a good idea. So I'm going to offer it up selflessly. And if you go for it, we're going to go on a great journey together. If you don't go for it, I'm not going to waste your time, and you're going to go do something that's better for you, and I'll go find somebody else to serve. And with that mindset, when I got that click, things really, really turned around. The nature of the relationships, the speed with which we can move forward. It shifted from ruthless qualification into, okay, this doesn't make sense, and we really walk away friends. And now I'm going to go find somebody who I can really serve.
Ruthless qualification. Boy, like I said, I listen to a lot of call recordings. I've heard some brutal qualification. And I mean, like 2 days ago, it goes on in the real world. And the person who's doing it is just doing what they think their boss wants them to do. And it's just backfiring. So I'm keeping an eye on the clock. We got 2 minutes here. Let's close out with making sure people know how to get in touch with you. How do people get in touch with you? And is there some call to action you would like to offer so that people could get to know you a little bit better?
I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So Jamal Reimer, just search it on LinkedIn and you'll find me there. And we can have a chat on Messenger to start. And probably the best way to get to know my message would be my book. It's called Mega Deal Secrets. You can get it on Amazon, or I give it away for free on my website, and I can leave you that URL.
Super. I'll add a little slide or something to the end of this so that we have all that in writing. Since we've gotten this far, you and I could talk forever. I always enjoy it. Is there anything else that you'd really like to say to wrap us up?
Giving has become more and more important on so many levels. And where I've come to in my 56th year walking this planet is, if we go out into the world looking to give and not waiting for some kind of response. It's not a give to get, it's just a give to give. There will be some subset of everyone who you're looking to help who will either reciprocate or come back to you and deliver value as well. But we can't look at each one and say, I helped you, now you help me. It's more of a, I'm just here to help. And somewhere along the way, the universe is going to have stuff coming back to me too. That's another big mindset that's shifted my behaviors and has shifted my outcomes.
Young man, you have learned much in your career. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn off the recording.